Terms and Conditions Legal Notice. The publisher has strived to be as accurate and complete as possible in the creation of this report, notwithstanding the fact that he does not warrant or represent at any time that the contents within are accurate due to the rapidly changing nature of the Internet. While all attempts have been made to verify information provided in this publication, the publisher assumes no responsibility for errors, omissions, or contrary interpretation of the subject matter herein. Any perceived slights of specific persons, peoples, or organizations are unintentional. In practical advice books, like anything else in life, there are no guarantees of income made. Readers are cautioned to rely on their own judgment about their individual circumstances to act accordingly. This book is not intended for use as a source of legal, business, accounting or financial advice. All readers are advised to seek services of competent professionals in legal, business, accounting and finance fields. You are encouraged to print this book for easy reading. Table of Contents. Foreword. Chapter 1. Responding to Stress. Chapter 2. Where does stress come from? Chapter 3. Your first step in managing stress. Chapter 4. Easing your tension to reduce stress. Chapter 5. You need a quiet mind to think clearly. Chapter 6. Managing stress at work. Chapter 7. Managing stress at home. Chapter 8. Managing stress in relationship. Chapter 9. Secrets to control your anger. Wrapping up. Foreword. There are various levels of stress that is generally suffered by anyone at one point of their lives or another. Unfortunately, stress levels have increased in current times and almost everyone at any age seems to go through this condition more frequently. Get all the info you need here. Reduce stress effectively. Chapter 1. Responding to stress synopsis. Responding and being able to cope with stress is what most people today are looking for, and thus it would be worth exploring how to respond to stress in the quest to gain some control over this negative effect and get back some semblance of peace in the everyday life cycle of the individual. The body naturally reacts to any indication of stress, and most times this response is not healthy and often fatal. When the body is challenged by any condition that it considers being under stress, it will kick in the natural responses that would require it to sort out the problem as quickly as possible in order to normalize the overall conditions. The hormones and cortisol from the adrenal cortex and adrenaline form the adrenal medulla go out on if usual synchronicity patterns. The basics. In the quest to normalize the body, many of the various systems will pit itself against each other. This most often will cause even further damage both mentally and physically. The initial ways the body responds to the mounting stress levels is through very visible conditions, one of which is skin inflammation or irritation. Cortisol also contains immune system responses, and is particularly useful when the responses are harmful, as then the symptoms can be treated as opposed to being a silent problem. Among the more visible signs are usually allergies and autoimmune disorder. The responses are described as allostasis, which is the stability of the body being maintained, or the homeostasis through the various stages of change. The body actively copes with the challenge by expending energy and attempting to put right the situation. For the most part it usually succeeds, but if left unchecked the stress situation can eventually prove to be too much for the body to handle. Chapter 2. Where does stress come from? Synopsis. It is perhaps an accepted fact that stress is usually brought on by outside forces. This is so ingrained in most people's mindsets, that the slightest inconvenience or signs of being pushed out of the comfort zones will get some negative reactions from the body, and that would be considered stress. Generally, outside forces are blamed for the internal turmoil that stress is supposed to cause. Where is it? When life in general does not unfold the way we perceive it should, determines the stress levels we experience. The element that needs to be controlled is becoming too attached to the acceptance that this disturbs the usual pattern in the daily life cycle, and that any changes in the current cycle are not so easily accommodated. Therefore, conditioning the mind to cope and overcome the circumstance that are perceived to contribute to the stress will then allow the individual to better help both body and mind to avoid any unnecessary conditions. Stressful thinking leads to stressful feeling is the most simplistic way of putting the condition into some perspective. Most studies tend to show this conclusively, and it does seem to be true that on some unconscious level, the extent of the stress felt is connected to the circumstances experienced. We can actually cause stress to be a condition within the body as our worries, fears and anxiety level are elevated by mental perceptions. Negativity in the mind is closely connected to the onset of stress, and most individuals somehow have the ability to convince the mind of things that have actually not unfolded. Not will it be possible to be so. But with this conditioning, the mind and body will work almost hand in hand to bring out the stress levels from within. Therefore, getting into the habit of negative thinking will spark this response, and the more it progresses to be a common reaction, the lesser the chances are to enable the body to cope with the onslaught. Chapter 3: Your first step in managing stress. Synopsis. Managing stress adequately would require the need to first be able to identify the main causes of the presence of stress within the confines of the individual's life. When this has been identified, then the relevant steps can be taken to address the stress-inducing circumstances. Some of the more common signs of stress are nervousness, withdrawal, constant tiredness, frequent headaches, increased use of alcohol, smoking and other unhealthy habits, an unexpected loss or increase in the diet intake or body weight, restless sleep, and irrational emotional outbursts and behavior patterns. There are all indications of an individual suffering from high level of stress. In recent times, the stress levels of most people have been so alarming that more often than not, hospitalization has to be recommended, where complete rest and medication is prescribed to normalize the body systems. Research has also been able to show that life expectancies have reduced drastically due to the presence of stress. Therefore, the idea behind managing the stress is all about gaining control over the stress, which should be to identify and address the possible causes of the stress, and then work towards ways to overcome it effectively. Once the symptoms can be identified and linked to stress condition, then the proper approach can be matched to the symptoms to improve the situation. This would require the individual to have a clear plan drawn up, which would be based on combating the stress occurrences with very practical and proven methods. These methods may include the use of a proper diet, exercise, or the actual physical change of environment. Being able to focus on a holistic view of the situation that causes the stress rather than one particular action that triggers it, will help the individual better understand and seek ways to avoid or improve on the circumstances that spark the onset of stress. Chapter 4: Easing your tension to reduce stress. Synopsis. It is popularly believed that if an individual is not exposed to the stress-causing circumstances, then the occurrence of the stress will be very unlikely and therefore not a dominant factor to contend with on a daily basis. This has some truth to it, but it is not always possible to avoid or remove oneself from a circumstance that will eventually cause the stress to surface. One of the ways that is recommended by most experts on the subject of stress management is to ease the tension, and in doing so bring the stress levels under adequate control. The following are some tips on how to ease tension and reduce stress levels significantly. Ease up. Rest. This is considered a very important ingredient to have in the makeup of an individual's lifestyle. A lot of rest will give the body and its various systems time and the leeway to rejuvenate adequately. This should be enough to keep it functioning at its optimum, thus providing the ideal circumstances to meet any possible additional requirement on its system, both mentally and physically. Relaxation. The individual should explore various ways to relax both the body and the mind. These ways should be easy and applicable to the situation at the time. Some relaxation methods can be done longer and in more calming surroundings, while some would require the individual to tap into the inner self to bring forth the calming mindset, to cope with any particularly stressful situation as it occurs. Pacing oneself. This is also another method of ensuring the tensions are eased or even preventing it from surfacing altogether, if the individual is able to pace the workload to keep it from becoming too overwhelming. Almost all cases of stress will be eventually connected to the fact that the circumstances that induced the stress were overwhelming, and the natural mechanisms that kick in would be the occurrence of stress. Chapter 5: You need a quiet mind to think clearly. Synopsis. There are some people who turn to the practice of quieting the mind through various different methods, of which meditations come out as the most popular. This method is usually practiced for the specific purpose of helping the mind to distress and take on a more serene and quiet thought process. Meditation is often recommended for those who are hyper in the way they approach any task or project, and then get stressed when the various aspects of the endeavor does not play out as desired. This will put the individual in the panic mode, which almost always is a big stress-inducing feature. Meditation can be practiced in many different ways, and through the various ways the practice of the quieting of the mind would be the most dominant one. Get quiet. In this particular form, the quieting of the mind would require the thinking part of the mind to be brought under control and be quieted, using the techniques which would be taught and required to be mastered. The idea would be to block the mind from focusing on the issues that are causing the stress and the ways to solve these issues, and instead redirect the mind to focus on other more calming elements. These may include elements such as a serene scene in the mind's eye, a calming feeling, a phrase, or anything that will cause the redirection of the thought process to be pleasant and calming. The inner voice should be tuned to helping the body adjust to better thought processes and induced into letting go of the problem completely. The calmed mind will then be able to feel the positive energy this kind of practice generates to refuel and rejuvenate the whole system and situation. Although quieting the mind may prove to be very challenging indeed, with a lot of focused practice is possible to achieve some level of control. Chapter 6: Managing Stress at Work. Synopsis. Stress is usually brought on by anxiety, and when this particular condition is addressed, it is possible to avoid building up the stress levels within the daily functions of the individual. Addressing the underlying causes of the stress would better help the individual deal or change the circumstances that cause the stress, and thereby learning to comfortably adapt and cope with workplace situations. The following are some recommendations on how to manage stress at work effectively. At work. Giving up coffee. Most people are really unaware of the effect coffee has on the body and mind systems. Coffee helps to further elevate any conditions into hyperactivity, thus creating the ideal combination that further enhances any stressful circumstances. The coffee flows into the blood and causes the adrenaline to be overly stimulated, thus putting the brain into overdrive. Being better organized. This is also another popular advice given to most stress-filled individuals. The idea of being organized does not seem to have any clear positive contributions to the individual, thus the inability to incorporate this very beneficial trait into the daily schedule. Learning the benefits of being organized will help the stressed-out individual to better appreciate its positive contributing factors, and when this is well adapted as a daily practice, the quality of life would definitely be much better. Taking short breaks to stretch and relax the mind periodically will also help to keep stress under control. Whenever the individual feels a little pressured, taking a few minutes to unwind and refocus after being energized will be helpful. Getting some fresh air will also work wonders on the body and mind. Stopping for lunch and tea breaks is also very important to keep the mind off work for a little while. Enjoying the break while the body goes through the replenishing of nutrients to the body is a good idea. Chapter 7: Managing Stress at Home. Synopsis. The home environment can usually seem like a battlefield, as there are usually individuals of various ages under one roof. This alone is a stress contributing factor, as there are many needs and wants to satisfy and cope with. With a little correct and comfortable practices, the stress levels for all concerned can be minimized. The following are some of the common areas that should be given due consideration in the quest to limit the occurrences of stress. At home. Being organized is probably the best way to beat the stress condition from being a regular occurrence. When there is some form of organization evident, all the individual elements that contribute to a smoother flow in the day would be covered, thus unfolding a completely new and calmer way of getting through the day. Taking the time to relax during the hectic day using whatever styles that most suit the individual would be recommended. These may include meditation, prayer, light exercises, deep breathing exercises, all of which contribute to rejuvenating the mind and body to face the rest of the home front issues. Those people who have the time to incorporate an exercise regimen before the start of the actual day's activities have attested to the fact that the body and mind are better able to cope with the onslaughts of the day, which include managing home problems. Stress at home can be avoided with this good start to the day, as it's refreshing and energizing. Taking to other people with similar issues could help the individual to learn and practice some of the styles others incorporate into their lives and home environment. This may help the individual to eliminate the stress-causing circumstances. Trying different ways to handle stress at home would be a better way to cope, as opposed to just keeping things repressed, which will only end up contributing to higher stress levels. Chapter 8: Managing Stress in Relationship Synopsis. A good amount of problems with a relationship can be sorted out easily by tackling the key issues that usually bring forth these problems. However, when these key issues are not addressed and dealt with, then the occurrence of stress becomes a norm, and this is a rather unpleasant and potentially damaging situation to be in. The following are some issues that usually bring out the stress conditions, and by managing these elements well, the individual will be able to enjoy a better quality relationship. Relationship. Both parties should be made aware of the fact that it is almost always impossible to change another person overnight or even over a long period of time. Accepting this is the first step in managing the relationship without adding stress to the combination. Working toward coping with the existing situation, instead of trying to force a change, will be a lot easier and certainly less stressful. Changing oneself is definitely more doable than attempting to change someone else. People are not naturally mind readers, and expecting the other party to be able to feel, read and understand everything the partner is going through, without actually having assistance of verbal communication, would be very unreasonable indeed. When this is a common practice, the party that is at a disadvantage because he or she is unable to read the relationship signs, would then become very stressed out when discontent and quarrels start. Therefore, stressing the need for voicing one's mind and thought process clearly and competently is something that should be practiced with the boundaries of the relationship all the time. Sometime the practice of writing down thoughts about the relationship will help to put things in a better perspective. All parties will be better able to deal with situations if everything is clearly visible and understood. Chapter 9: Secrets to Control Your Anger Synopsis. Stress often leads to unforeseen anger outbursts, especially when the underlying issues are not addressed. The outbursts can sometimes be so unexpected that it could take on an element of violence, and this of course is very damaging indeed. The following are some secrets on how to exercise control on the individual's anger issues so that stress can be avoided. Anger. Taking a time out can be especially effective in controlling the possibility of having an anger outburst displayed. It gives the individual a chance to step back and take a moment to relax and collect his or her thoughts. This usually works well if the individual moves away from the situation that is causing the anger, and focusing on something else temporarily until the anger subsides. When the individual has regained some control of the anger, and it is no longer dominating the body and mind, then the individual would be in a better position to address the original situation that brought on the anger in the first place. It would also have given the individual the time and space to reconsider the facts and the feelings, and if the anger was warranted. Learning the art of controlling the tongue is perhaps the most powerful exercise the individual can and should master. By being able to think before expressing anything verbally, the individual is well able to ensure better encounters and outcomes, as anger usually brings out the worst in people and circumstances. This negative contribution of anger will not help to solve anything and instead will eventually cause elevated stress levels. Coming up with solutions rather than focusing on the problem may also be another route to take when it comes to addressing anger issues. If the individual is occupied with finding a solution, then there is less likelihood of the mind dwelling on the negativity of the problem which contributes to the anger. Wrapping up. Some people are in such a hurry to know and plan for their future, that they inevitably induce stress. This is especially so for those who are unable to stop and enjoy what they have but are constantly looking to strive for better and bigger things. This mode and lifestyle usually causes the individual to be in a constant state of worry and stress, as the mind and body are unable to take a complete break. The following are some tips on how to stop the worry and stress-proof the individual's life adequately so that some level of sanity can be injected back into his or her life. Being able to analyze risks will help the individual better plan for the future without stressing at every turn. With the ability to analyze, the individual can then make the necessary adjustment to ensure everything is always smooth flowing and fairly ideal. Strange as it may seem, the idea of scheduling time to worry is not only a beneficial one, but also one that should be given serious consideration. There is an element of freedom when the individual makes a conscious decision not to worry outside the allotted time frame. Telling people not to worry somehow does not seem to work, as over time this has become a very dominant and natural practice for most individuals. Therefore, scheduling time to worry would probably be a better option if the individual is unable to accept and practice the eradication of worry from their life. Another way to stop worrying is to replace these worrisome thoughts with other activities, which would include the repetition of positive sentences and positive thoughts. There are a lot of data showing this practice's effectiveness and its benefits when used as a good soothing alternative to worrying. Thank you for watching this video.